Gardaí have apologised to the woman at the centre of the Kerry Babies scandal. They have admitted it was a matter of significant regret that it had taken so long to confirm that Joanne Hayes wasn't the mother of a baby boy found on a Kerry beach in 1984. Now, joining us with that story and others making news this morning are Group Political Correspondent for Communicorp, Sean Defoe, and Director of the Irish Academy of Public Relations, Ellen Gunning. Good morning to you both, and Sean in particular.
Good morning.
Welcome to you. It's the first time on with us, first of many. Ellen, you and I were just talking before we came on. We were around long enough to remember this, and I'm watching all of the stuff on the news yesterday and last night. I was reminded quite forcibly of just how appalling a travesty this was. And the details all came back to me, and I don't know, possibly like a lot of people watching it, I found myself getting angry all over again about it.
I think that was everybody's reaction. You thought, oh my God, we'd forgotten it, which is unfair to Joanne Hayes, but we'd forgotten it because it just wasn't on the front pages of the paper, and suddenly you begin to relive it, and you relive that anger. I remember at the time, I mean, it's almost like going back to Ireland 300 years ago. It doesn't feel like it was 30 years ago. But when you think of what happened at the time, the memory that I have most is of the tragedy of this woman being treated as if in some way she was responsible for all the woes of the world. She was treated very badly. And the one thing that I thought was good was that the Gardaí have actually apologised for the pain and suffering and anxiety that they caused her, which is the minimum that they can do, but at least they have finally recognised...
34 years too late.
Oh, 34 years, far too late. It should never have taken this long. But DNA has established finally, and it does seem that the Gardaí still, some Gardaí certainly still believe that possibly she was the mother still of baby John. Even though they had accepted that she wasn't, the tribunal had found that she wasn't. DNA seems to have finally put it to rest. And it just made me think that all of these rules around DNA and this PC society that we live in, and that DNA, if you give a blood sample for something, it shouldn't be kept over X number of years because you're entitled for it to be destroyed. I just found myself thinking, if I've given a blood sample, I don't mind if they keep it forever. If it helps to identify something in the future, rule me in or rule me out. So I suppose in some ways she should be very grateful for the DNA testing. I think also the really good thing was that the acting commissioner, Donal O'Coulon, actually phoned her and wrote to her to apologise. And I thought that was a change. That was something at a minimum that she was entitled to, but it was a nice touch that he did it.
Sean, generationally, you would probably have a different take on this because Ellen and I were there, we saw it, but we were also part of a very different Ireland. And this is also an Ireland where, around the same time, or same era, a 16-year-old girl died in a grotto on Granard because she was pregnant and couldn't, because society didn't approve of that sort of thing. So that's the context. But watching this last night with my wife, and again from the same generation, my daughter, who's of your generation, a bit younger, was absolutely horrified, A, that it could happen, and B, that a woman would go on, well, actually, there would be a tribunal which was to investigate the behaviour of the Gardaí, but it actually became a trial of this woman's private life and her morals.
Yeah, completely. Yesterday was actually the first time I'd ever heard of the story. It just hadn't crossed my radar at all before, and as you said, that generation gap, I wasn't born when it happened. But when you look at some of the stuff that happened, it really does beggars belief. And after that tribunal, as you said, there was a finding that, you know, there was no ill finding against the Gardaí after this, despite the fact that it seems, or certainly there is the suggestion, that they may have coerced a confession from this woman's family, and that went ahead despite them knowing that this wasn't the case and wasn't true. And the later said, you know, that they were coerced into that. Some of the different bits that went on, I mean, when you look at the theory being espoused that she had had twins from two different men, which is something that can biologically happen, but it's 1 in a billion. It's an absolutely, you know, remarkable thing to be following.
There were 20 known cases in the world at the time.
Which is mental to think that that can then be a serious line of inquiry. And the fact that they really went after this woman, some of the stuff that they asked in that tribunal is absolutely shocking. It wouldn't happen again today, you would hope. Lise Hand has actually a very good piece in the Ireland edition of the Times today saying, if it happened today, if that person had been walking down a beach in Carsaveen and found a baby's body, the first thing that would happen would a photo would be snapped. It would be on social media. It would be like Ilan Kurdi when you think of the refugee crisis. It would become an international scandal, not just one here in Ireland. So it's amazing to think that this went on.
Well, and as we said, 34 years too late, the apology comes, and there's also a question about whether there should now be a formal state apology and whether the state should write Joanne Hayes a very large cheque. Whether that would ever recompense her for what she went through, I don't know. There is another, there's three big questions. First and foremost, baby John was savagely murdered, stabbed 28 times. Who murdered baby John? And the second question is, of course, how did a family of innocent people come to make a confession to something that they didn't do? But there's a third question, which is that this apology comes now at a very interesting juncture, because right at this moment in time, we have another tribunal going on about Garda behaviour. So we say it was a very different country back then, and things have changed dramatically. But have they, Ellen?
I hope it's a sign that they are changing. I hope it is a sign that the cold case unit are looking at things in a very different light. Obviously, the behaviour of the Gardaí during this entire conduct of this investigation was highly questionable at best. The Gardaí themselves have accepted that. They said that I'm trying to remember exactly what they said that their conduct of the investigation fell well short of the standards that they should have applied. So I think they're accepting, however quietly, that they didn't conduct this investigation the way they should have. How Joanne confessed to murdering a baby that she didn't murder, and her family confessed to throwing this child into the sea is just beyond belief. That's a question that hasn't been answered yet. And you're right, the other major question is, this child, baby John, was savagely murdered. Whoever murdered that baby is still out there. This wasn't a child that was stillborn. This was a child that was born and that died as a result of 28 stab wounds. I'd like the Gardaí to actually establish who murdered that child.
Okay.
If DNA can.
Let's move on to the other story, which is all over the papers and social media this morning, which is David Alan Turpin and his wife Louisa Anna Turpin. These 13 children, 10 girls, 3 boys, basically being held as slaves, shackled by their own parents, starved, beaten, apparently being brainwashed with some sort of Pentecostal belief. And I don't want to go down the religious extreme thing here, but it's in this day and age, in a very kind of upmarket, middle class suburb. The fact that this was going on for years and nobody noticed, John, is quite extraordinary, isn't it?
It does make you wonder what goes on about behind closed doors. And I was thinking it was extraordinary. How could the neighbours not notice it? But when you think of it, how many of us actually do call in on our neighbours, or how many have a neighbour who, you know, the family's kind of quiet, you think they keep to themselves, so you don't really ever know what's going on. And most of us, I suppose, will keep in touch with our neighbours, friends, relatives through social media now. And when you look at the social media page, the Facebook page that this family had, all they were seeing is, oh, they're gone to Disneyland. They're all dressed up in the same stuff. As there was a picture earlier on your news of them all in thing 1 and thing 2 outfits, going right up to 15 for all the different children. So from the outside impression, looked like a very, very normal family. But so the condition that some of these children and adults now were in, the 17-year-old who got out to actually alert the police, they thought she was a 9-year-old girl because she was that malnourished and that in such a bad condition. And the police, when they arrived, didn't actually realise there was 8 adults in this family. That's the kind of condition they were in. So you really don't know what is going on.
Yeah, Alan, people would say, well, you know, and again, America's a very different society to us. They wouldn't be possibly in and out of each other's homes the same way we would here with, you know, our neighbours on our street. But the family knew. The grandparents hadn't seen the children for years. One of the sisters hadn't had any contact with them for 19 years.
The family didn't step in any way, and these children were all being homeschooled. Now, there must be some authority that calls in to check, are the children just being taught all the things they should be taught? Surely somebody in authority noticed that these children, the most startling thing I think about these children is not that they look so happy, it's that they all look so young. 2 years to 29 years, I couldn't identify a 29-year-old
They all look like something from
in that photograph.
a Stepford movie or something
They
like
do,
that.
it's very
I'm just
scary.
wondering whether the fact that the authorities didn't step in had anything to do with the fact that this was a nice middle-class family and the father was an engineer. If they had been living in the projects, would those kids have been taken off those parents years ago?
Very possibly, and possibly a report would have been issued earlier.
We will leave it at that. Thank you both very much indeed. Nice to meet you, Mr. Defoe. We will see you again, I have no doubt, and wish you all the best in your new job with Communicorp. Now, let us know your thoughts on any of these topics. You can text followed by your comments to 53131. You can email rndm@tv3.ie, Facebook or tweet us at rndmtv3. Plenty more to come in the programme. We'll be back after this break.